policy. So can you pull up the amended 9/13/2022 version of the body camera policy? And I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. So we worked for a while on body camera policy. Again, at the end of the day, it's the sheriff's responsibility to adopt policy, and we as a committee recommendations or guidance. It looks like the sheriff did go ahead and already adopt/amend this version. I did have a few questions, and then I was going to open it up to other committee members that might have questions. And ideally, this would be it on body camera policy. We would complete this agenda item today. I know we've been working on it for over a year. So my question, I think, is for Jackie and Sheriff Krapp. We met, you and myself and Rob Lagonia and the chairman met in July at 401 State. And there was originally four different things that we were looking to have the body camera address. And there was two of them that you were not considering addressing. And in that meeting, when we talked about the banning of the creation of suspect arrays where no crime had taken place, there was a seeming confusion in that the undersheriff said, well, we already have a suspect array policy. So why do we need it in our body camera policy? And I said, well, the public might not know that you have this other policy. So even just cross-referencing that other policy, and you under the public's not going to see these. And so I think there was a misunderstanding that these are public information. The public can view these policies, the public can review these policies. And so at that meeting, you had both agreed to cross-reference what I don't remember the exact name of it, but your suspect array policy that already banned the creation of these suspect arrays. But I don't see that in here. So am I missing that, or did you guys change your mind after our last meeting and just not get back to me on it?
Sheriff, you still on?
Yeah, I got you. No, we that should be in here, Tristia, that what we allow and what we don't allow. I'm trying to find it here in the actual document. And I apologize. It's been a crazy morning. You want to move on?
Can I ask how that was even where that came from? The initiation or the thought process that would even be because that's just foreign to us. So where that concept came from that we would use body camera footage for?
Yeah. So when this process started and the police reform implementation committee started and was tasked at body camera policy. So as supervisors, when body cameras were purchased, it was with the understanding that a body camera policy would be implemented. Mr. Krapp's predecessor just adopted like a template from New York State that actually right in there in the adopted policy, it said, you shouldn't just adopt this template, you should really make it your own. And so this committee is working with Mr. Krapp's predecessor on, recommendations that we wanted to see. And a lot of it came from the public. Supervisor Chamides provided a document, which I've shared with you, that said, here are some of the things that I've heard from my constituents and we've heard through the public process that we want addressed, and they were all numbered. So the four that Sheriff Bartlett had agreed to was number 4, number 5, number 7, number 8. Number 4 was banning video manipulation methods. And if it's something you already do, then great, let's put it in writing and commit to it. So a lot of this, the whole reason that the police reform process came along was to really have public trust and regain public trust. And so especially if it's something you're doing already anyway, then why not put it in writing, put it in the policy? Because like you said, why would you create suspect arrays out of video that didn't involve a crime? Well, it's something that has happened other places, and thank goodness we don't do it here in Columbia County, but part of the purpose of a policy is to solidify that and to let the public know, hey, we're not doing these things. And so when we met in July, Jackie, you said, oh yeah, I can cross-reference this suspect array policy that we had that I wasn't even aware as a supervisor that you guys had. And then when I read this amended policy, I don't see it, and maybe I'm missing it. Or like I said, maybe you changed your mind and just didn't communicate back with me after that meeting. Because the other one too, I don't see in here, which was the banning video manipulation methods. We had talked and you didn't like the original wording, but I had sent amended wording that you said, oh yeah, we are okay with the amended wording. And I also didn't see that in here. So basically our meeting in July with Mr. Lagonia, myself, the chairman, and the two of you, I thought we were all on the same page that the sheriff had agreed to add back in these two things that his predecessor had prior agreed to. And when I read this draft, I don't see them in here. So I'm just trying to be clear. Did you change your mind and we just didn't get back to a meeting to communicate it? Or did you get in here? I'm just trying to understand the process of how we got to this draft after that July meeting.
Trustee, the measures for preventing data tampering, is that what you're referring to on page 4?
Page 4.
And you're right, there is no, we left out the cross-reference to our.
Yeah, so on page 4, that's number 5 of Supervisor Chimidi's document. It's require a note in the video file for every time a video is opened, downloaded, shared, or modified in every way. I think that addresses that in number 2 under B. For the purpose of an audit monitoring system, the CCA utilizes software that creates a data footprint for every time a video file is viewed, by whom, how long it was viewed, etc. So I think that one was in there even when we met in July. As well as the data sharing agreements, opting out of data sharing agreements. It was number 4 and number 7, which was banning video manipulation methods and banning using suspect arrays. That at the July meeting, we had more of a conversation, and then you agreed that you would add those back in and get us a new draft. And I just don't see either of those in here.
Yeah, I mean, there's only certain things we can and can't do to the program. I mean, it already creates a note in the program anytime it's viewed. So, you know, there's certain things we can't change within the Axon program.
No, we're good on that one. The note for every time it's viewed. I'm talking about the banning using data when there was no crime that took place, using that video footage to create suspect arrays, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And again,
so the suspect arrays, yes, you are correct. It appears that that's been left out. And that's an oversight on our part. We'll get that referenced in here. That we will not use for suspect arrays. That appears to be an oversight. We also spoke with based on some other new issues that came up. We spoke with legal counsel this morning, and we just have to. There's a few changes in here, including where it says officer within our policy. We want to change that to deputy. So there's a couple things we'll have to change and send you the new copy anyway. So we'll get there.
Awesome. And the banning video manipulation methods, if you remember the wording that had been in Supervisor Chimidi's document, you weren't comfortable with, nor was your predecessor. And I had sent modified wording that we discussed at a meeting, and you were comfortable with the modified wording. Do you want me to resend that to you so you can look at it again?
Do you have that? Do you have that with you that you can read the wording? Because from what I remember from what Supervisor Chimidis said, it was exactly the same thing. We were simply changing the verbiage, which to me, you know, why are we going to change our policy, verbiage when it says the same thing? And I'm just really trying to create eliminate duplication of efforts and get to the end of this.
Yeah.
And please, I don't want to sound like I'm frustrated. It's been a ring to implement a lot of changes, and we've had no issues. So, it seems like sometimes a bit much when we haven't had, a bunch of concerns, and a lot of the concerns are for things that have happened well outside of our area and in PDs that are of a much larger percentage and numbers, and I get it,
Yeah.
but,
And I think,
you gotta put an end to it.
frustration. And I think part of it, when Supervisor Chimides created this document, it was with a lot of input from constituents, where even though things may not be happening here, they really wanted that public trust. And, we talked a lot about this, you and I, and that, by no fault of your department per se, there is a lot of distrust right now of the police and bringing, I think that some of these things that might seem minor to you, like why do we need to put that in? I do think they go a long way with some of the constituents that I've heard from, to have right in the policy that you're not going to do that. And you might say, why would we ever do that? Of course we're not doing that. Well, great, let's put it in writing, and now the public knows and feels that trust is built. So the wording that I sent is all right. And I can resend this as well. And this was the one that I have notes that at the meeting with the sheriff, yes to 5, 7, and 8. So we've already talked about those. You're going to put back in the suspect arrays piece. And yes to number 4 with proper wording. So this is the wording that I had emailed. When releasing body camera footage to the public and press, videos must be released with the full buffer mode attached at the playhead, and not just once the camera was activated through the event button. The full unaltered footage should be included, and not footage that is altered through methods including zooming, cropping, slowing motion, and any graphical overlays in their official pieces. This clause does not apply to internal usage of footage. Files can be compressed or converted to a different file type in order to make transferring the file easier, so long as the overall footage remains consistent for the viewer. Footage may be redacted or blurred for privacy reasons. If a redaction occurs for privacy reasons, it must be documented in writing and shall include a description of the redaction and the reason. The written redaction shall be made available to the public. Video stills, including stills with modifications such as zooming in, may be released to the public to aid in an investigation. However, if the full footage is not also released, an explanation as to the reason why the full video is not released must be made in writing available to the public. And I can re-email that out.
Supervisor, with all due respect, we wouldn't have the manpower, the time, or the money in order to do these narratives. I mean, it takes, you're talking about an 8-hour video, and there could be, hundreds of redactions, and to go into an explanation on why every single license plate was redacted and every single frame would, just take, man hours that we don't have by personnel that we don't currently possess. So, I mean, I don't want to overload our plate by saying we'll make all these promises that we clearly cannot extend. I mean, for every single frame, there may be 20 license plates redacted just to preserve the identity of people that weren't involved, or passers-bys that that weren't involved. This is part of the redaction process that we're getting funding for the capabilities through Axon to have, to reduce the amount of man hours it takes to go through and redact, but to make a note for every single blurred face or blurred sign or blurred license plate would be virtually impossible for our office to do.
Okay, so if we took out if a redaction occurs for privacy reasons, it must be documented in writing and shall include a description. The written redaction shall be made available to the public, and just say footage may be redacted or blurred for privacy reasons, but you're okay with the part about releasing the footage that is unaltered to the public so that the public can view. This is to prevent, for example, a cropping or a zooming or a certain way that makes it look different than maybe the way it actually occurred. And of course you can zoom in. One of your predecessor's concerns was, wait a minute, we might need to zoom in and put that face up on the TV, like, hey, we're looking for this person. So it certainly allows that, but as well as just releasing it in its unadulterated, untouched form, with the exception of redacted or blurred for privacy reasons, and then not requiring documentation in writing as to why it's redacted. Am I hearing that correctly?
I think it's situational. I mean, if the case is complete, and it's going to trial, and at that point it gets foiled, it's a possibility we could release it. But all this information goes out to the district attorney's office and the prosecutor in the form of discovery. So, I mean, I'm not sure if we wanted this to release a complete body cam footage of, we'll say, an infant death or a murder suicide or something to that degree, where the deputy is on scene of this and this happens in his presence. I mean, there's protective issues there that it's so I know based on the incident itself.
But you wouldn't release that to the public anyway. This is saying when releasing body camera footage to the public and press. So this is saying when you do release it you'll release it in an unmessed with form. It's not saying you're going to.
But legally, we can't do that. Anything that's released is going to be released via a FOIL, and there will be redactions.
No, it says redacted. So hang on. It's saying that when you release body camera footage to the public and press, and you're only going to do that when it's appropriate, right? Not with an ongoing investigation or any of the other things. When you do that, when you release it to the public and press, you're going to do it without, cropping, zooming, slowing motion. But it does say footage may be redacted or blurred for privacy reasons. So you're still going to do that.
But even to the public and press, we will only release it via a FOIL request.
Right. This isn't saying you release it. It's saying when you do, whatever your process is to allow it to be released to the public and press, that you're going to do it in an unadulterated format. You're not going to crop it or zoom it or slow motion it. So it's not saying that you're going to always release it to the public and press. It's saying when you do that, whatever your process is to do that, a FOIL, whatever, that you're not going to mess with the footage before you release it, with the exception of redacting and blurring for privacy reasons.
Excuse me, Supervisor, and sorry, Sheriff, for cutting you off.
No, thank you.
One of the, I think, crux of the issues is the language that you're using, Supervisor, by saying messes with the video and then providing it in an unaltered form. I believe what the sheriff and the undersheriff were trying to say is that in all circumstances, in any video that could be released, most likely there is going to be a redaction that needs to occur. So if they need to make a redaction, then they can't release it in its unaltered form. I understand that further you're trying to clarify and say, well, you can't crop it or adjust to alter the direction or what it appears to be. But I think the difficulty that the undersheriff and the sheriff are having is that in order to provide privacy to victims of crimes, including people who may not want the video released, they have to take those things into consideration. And what I believe the language that you're using, it may not be actually feasible under what their own restrictions are to comply that narrowly and construe the language in their policy that narrowly, because there are circumstances in which they may need to do so. I think that's what the sheriff is trying to say. And I don't mean to put words in the sheriff's mouth, but I'm just trying to assist because in most circumstances, all video, as worn by police officers, it does encompass, and we do see victims of crimes who have rights separate of the public, and those rights need to be taken into consideration in releasing any such video.
Absolutely. And I guess maybe I'm the only one that has it in front of me. So to say footage may be redacted or blurred for privacy reasons, that doesn't address everything you were just talking about, a victim, or, I mean, everything I'm hearing is redacting and blurring for victims for privacy reasons. And I feel like putting that sentence addresses that.
Well, I think we talked about cropping it and zooming it. And I mean, clearly we may have to crop some video if it's an 8-hour video footage of, the body cam just doesn't get shut off after the initial incident. It may run for 8 hours in the entire shift. I don't know if we would release that entire 8-hour video of press person, because there may be some things in there that deal with situations with the person's family and interview, something similar to that have no bearing on what the press is asking for.
Okay, how do others feel?
I mean,
Okay.
Supervisor, I think, respectfully, again, all this information is capable of foiling the information. The sheriff's office has no intent and, of hiding anything, of trying to, change or alter anything. We can't do that based on on the program itself. It flags every time someone logs on. It will flag who logged on for how long, what exactly was viewed. There's documentation footprints to every single thing this Axon program does, and that's why we spent the extra money to get the Axon program, and why we're continuing to look for funding and spend the money on the redaction so we can get it out. And it's done through the program, and there's fail-safes built within the program in order to ensure, continuity, that we're not redacting something in one incident and not redacting it in another based on human error.
Dave Hall, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I have two questions. One of which is prior to, under the sheriff's predecessor, we had a big discussion about how much staff hours this work takes, and that's something we understood. And so my question is to you, Supervisor, did we sort of resolve that in any way that made it sort of more palatable and possible seeming for departments such as ours, which is such a small one, to be able to do that redaction? So my question too then includes the sheriff. Does the program, the Axiom program, cut down on a lot of that hours because so much of it is automatic? Does it automatically clear out license plates and faces? Is it a time saver and a staff hour saver?
Absolutely, Dave. I mean, that's why we're going with the program, spending extra money for continuity and for the sake of saving time. But, again, it's not something that we're just going to say, okay, hey, here you go, have at it, do it artificial intelligence, program to go through and redact. We have to have someone go through and make sure that everything that needs to be redacted was redacted. We have to set up the parameters for redaction. So, someone still has to go through and say, well, this license plate needs to be redacted, but this one may not because, for whatever reason, maybe it was involved in the incident. So we still have to have an individual oversee the process.
Right.
We're not looking for excuses here. I can't speak for my predecessor, and I won't speak for my predecessor. However, we're 25, positions down right now. We have legislation that's unfunded coming in the door every day. We're needing to hire more manpower just based on new legislation that's unfunded, and we're, trying to keep up with everything the state is mandating us. This is unfortunately, the smaller agencies are really getting hammered with this. If we had $1.2 million, we could get a program that would, take care of a lot of these issues. The state police are looking into things, and they've purchased, and I don't want to speak for the state police, but they purchased programs, a year ago that still haven't come to fruition. So we can promise you the world, and that's just not my game. I'm not going to promise you something I can't give you.
Right. So before I go on to my second question for the supervisor is, I know I certainly hear all that you've said, and you have stressed it, and the committee knew it, before you were elected, even how burdensome running the department is presently. I totally hear you on that for sure. So my next question, Supervisor Hoteling, is, can you explain again why this issue was so important to constituents that we heard from in the beginning of the process, and as we went on with this committee, just to make it clear that the point was not to unduly burden anyone, but to protect the rights of victims, family of victims, and sometimes the family of accused people, if my understanding is correct, that we really want to make sure when something goes out to the press, for instance, that it's clear and as clear and accurate as possible. And the same thing when families, whether it be families of the victims or families of accused perpetrators, see it. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Bill Hughes, do you want to take on the police reform committee? And I know you got a lot of feedback on this.
Yeah. So Dave, when we were talking about the videos, what came up several times is some of the incidents that took place around the country and the time it took for families to actually get the video. And in some instances, when they received the video, going back to the conversation I was hearing about redacted, but there were in some cases, families were complaining about, certain things being cropped or video looking distorted in a way that would make it questionable on what was taking place. And so I believe some of this language that was just recently drawn was drawn up by Supervisor Chemides, who were looking at some of the language from some of the other municipalities. But I think what it was trying to get to is not so much saying that the sheriff's office or any other police or law enforcement agency couldn't do the redacting and the things that Supervisor Holton was talking about, but more specifically speaking to doing any kind of cropping or slowing down or speeding up where it would distort the original video. So how do you get to that point with the language? I don't know. I think that we need to sit down and work through that. But that
Sheriff?
Yeah, if I could just say, regardless of what condition the video is sent to the press, it could be augmented by the press. I mean, by the press.
well, Sheriff, the crux wasn't really so much when we were talking about it. We weren't really concerned about it being released to the press. When it's released, it's released. What we were more concerned about when it was released to the person that was actually claiming the harm.
Well,
they would get it at the same. Most times they got it at the same time that the press got it.
Well, I mean, I can tell you this, if we release a video that's augmented in any way, or if anyone does in a law enforcement agency, the original has to be released in discovery. If we augment some type of video and alter, that type of evidence, we're tampering with evidence. And then when we would be charged in the criminal offense, that's clearly not the intent of the sheriff's office. And it's definitely not my intent to violate any laws. My job here is to make sure laws are enforced. And Dave, if I could just make a comment, I'm not sure it wasn't meant to be offensive, but my position.
Oh, I'm sorry, you went out there.
That you said, it's burdensome, but I don't feel this position is burdensome. It's a privilege and an honor to serve here as sheriff, and we're trying to do everything we can in order to protect our community and to conform with the requests of the panel. However, sometimes they're conflicting. Serving our community and doing our job is what exactly we're doing here. Even though we don't always see eye to eye here, believe me when I tell you, the decisions I'm making are based on protecting the community and the office. And I'm sure you didn't meant that in no negative way.
Yeah, I didn't phrase that very well. I meant that you guys have a lot on your plate, and as you've pointed out, you're not as fully staffed as you need to be. You've got unfunded mandates coming through, so that's what I meant by the burdens that you guys happen to be working on. Right, that we understood that. So I apologize. I think I just worded it badly.
Thank you.
At some point here, though, we have to, if this is the sheriff's policy, it's the sheriff's policy. I mean, we've been talking about this for months, and I'm not saying I agree with it or I don't agree with it. I'm just saying that if there's room to move on it, fine. But if there's not, at some point, we have to accept what the sheriff's policy is. That's just what this group is about. I mean, we can, if there's more to talk about, I'm happy to do it. But again, if we've beat this to death and this is where we're at, other than those changes with suspect arrays on 5, 7, and 8, et cetera, I mean, at some point we have to accept what it is.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think that's a good point. And my question for you, Sheriff, is are you open to working on this wording to something that doesn't become burdensome and doesn't work, but also addresses concerns that have been expressed of the public? Are you open, maybe outside of this committee, maybe even just through an email thread, to working the wording, or is it just a hard no? Because if it's a hard no, then we'll be done with body cameras and we'll move on. If you're open to working the wording through in a way that could address both concerns, then I'm happy to do that work.
Well, of course I'm open. I mean, we've been working on this for quite some time now. So, I mean, I think there's a few things that can be changed, like banning the suspect array, but as far as manipulating video, I don't think there needs to be a policy created for something that's clearly against, New York State penal law. If we're tampering with evidence, it's against the law. So whether it's clearly stated in a policy that says you cannot violate New York State penal law, I think it's already there. I mean,
You're saying it's against the law to zoom or crop or slow motion video before you release it to the public?
if we're manipulating something to make it something that it's not, it's tampering with evidence. Clearly, if we're trying to make it seem like it's something that it isn't, it's tampering. It's not opinion of the court, but I'm not really sure what you say by manipulating the video. If we just take a chunk out of it and zoom in on that chunk and then release it to the press, is that what you're saying?
So what it's basically saying is that when you release footage, it's not telling you when you need to or not. When you release footage, that you're going to release it in a full unaltered footage, at least included. So if you do zoom in, cropping, slow motion, you're also going to include the unzoomed, cropped, slow motion version. It's not about redacting or blurring. Obviously, it says right here, footage may be redacted or blurred. So what this is saying is when you release footage, and I don't think it's illegal for you to zoom or crop or slow motion before you send it to the press. This is saying when you do that, if you're going to zoom or crop or slow motion, which it doesn't say you can't do, that you're also going to give the press the cropped and slow motion. It doesn't prevent you from redacting or blurring for privacy reasons. It says right here that that's allowed. Before it asks that you put in the file why you redacted, I heard that that's too burdensome, so taking that out. And what it's saying is that when you release it in a version that is zoomed, cropped, slow motion, graphical overlays, if that's what you release to the public or the press, you will also release the version that doesn't have zooming, cropping, slow motion. You're not going to release the unredacted version, as Mr. Carty said, and you said, obviously there's privacy concerns, victim. We don't want to not allow you to do what you need to do, but it's just saying that you're also going to release it in a way that's not zoomed and cropped in slow motion.
Yeah, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I think that's something that we would have to refer to, basically refer to legal counsel on this. I can't think of any time that we would redact, crop, or any other form, augment any type of footage that we release to the press based on that request being through a FOIL. We would, I think, requested, from 11:05 to 12 o'clock at night. That's the only thing they requested in a FOIL. That's what we would supply them. I think it comes down to, semantics, really. If they request just a portion of the video, we're not going to release 8 hours of it.
So am I hearing then that you're open to Elena and maybe you and I emailing this wording and making sure that it covers what you're talking about? Am I hearing that you're open to that?
Supervisor, For the sake of time, I would say that maybe a meeting that you, I, and Elena and the undersheriff, and if Supervisor Lagoni is interested, we could have that conversation. But I think the policy at this point, there is a few things that can be tweaked, but I don't want to go and reinvent the wheel.
Okay, so just to be clear, because on the banning suspect arrays, you're going to add that back in. You're changing officer to deputy and sending a new version. At this time, you don't want to discuss further the manipulation methods, or you do want to discuss?
Yeah. I like I said, I think that's a conversation that it could be done in a smaller group. We could sit down and discuss that. I know there's a lot of things we want to talk about today.
Okay.
So then the question is that other than what Supervisor Hodling just said with the arrays, then this would be the document that would be presented through this group, and any other changes would happen amongst a smaller group. Is that what we're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So for the purposes of body camera policy with this group, the amended 9/13/2022 version is going to be amended to change officer to deputy and some other things that legal counsel advised, and adding back in the banning suspect arrays. And that will be it for this group. And then on a smaller group, Rob, the undersheriff, sheriff, me, and Elena will have a meeting to talk further about the manipulation methods. And if the sheriff agrees to then also make that amendment, he will. And if not, he won't. Good?
And just for clarification, I don't want anyone to be confused. We're not banning arrays completely. We're just not utilizing body cam footage to create arrays.
Yes. I'm sorry. When no crime has taken place, you're not going to take footage of some, scary looking guy walking down the street and be like, hey, is this your suspect? You're not going to use footage where no crime took place to create suspect.
Yep.
We
we're on
don't
the same
use,
page.
we don't use body cam footage at all for suspect arrays. We don't use it at all.
Even better. Okay. So I think we're done with this agenda item, and I think we're done with body camera discussion amongst this committee. And next up, we have citizen review, right? Yeah, citizen review panel. Elena did draft up an opinion. Sherry shared it with this entire committee. Elena, I'll turn to you to lead this part of the meeting and maybe summarize. And then if people have questions, they can go directly to you with them.
So well, first of all, good morning. And you saw my memo. As you can see, we couldn't find something that said the sky is blue or say something that the sky is orange. There is very little opinion out there. So quite frankly, hang on as I try to pull it up because I can't manipulate it as it is on the screen. From our perspective, we don't see anything legally that would preclude the Board of Supervisors from maintaining that information, or even the citizens panel review. However, as I very aptly said, for it to be accurate and complete, it really falls on the sheriff's willingness to share his information. And I didn't opine as to that. We all know he has the ability to maintain it. So with regard to the very specific question that was raised by the district attorney, I did not see anything legally that precluded the statistical information being maintained by someone other than the sheriff. So that's kind of the end of my report.
Great. Thank you, Elena. And as we discussed at the last meeting, there is a citizen review panel that has been created by the chairman. The reform that we filed with the state said that we would create one. And now the question is, how does it operate? What teeth does it have? And long story short, not many. Like there's not much other than kind of a statistical data analysis. And Elena, if the complainant wanted to file it with the committee, that would be up to them. And whatever that person filed would then be with the committee. But that would be up to the person filing whether they wanted to do that or not. If the complaint came just to the sheriff's office, he could share it if he wanted to, but there's nothing requiring that.
Yep, you pretty much summed it right up. And I did try to address one of the issues that former Supervisor Hughes raised about, the Board of Supervisors, and it kind of talks about what's there. I mean, there are some mechanisms that are out there, but quite frankly, no one's really talking about the retention of records. So I think I gave you the best I could with the information that is legally available under the case law.
Okay.
Okay?
So let's get to the meat and bones of this citizens review panel. There was a panel put together. This panel can then operate, but as based on Elena's legal reference here, it doesn't have much that it can do. So, what does the committee or the group, feel about that? Because basically, if what I'm reading is that if a complaint is filed through the sheriff's department and the sheriff doesn't share it with the committee, then the committee doesn't even know about the complaint. And if the complaint gets filed with the committee would then pass it on to the sheriff. And whatever the conclusion was, if the sheriff decides not to share it with the committee, then the committee to me, it's more of a pass through. But if in fact, and I don't want to speak for you, Sheriff, but it's my understanding that, your sense was that, this is handled well through the sheriff's department. You have a policy and a procedure in place, and things are being handled appropriately through the sheriff's department. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was my understanding after the last meeting that you weren't that inclined to be sharing that information with a committee.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So
Um,
what is the sense of
go
the
ahead.
group then, in reference to what this committee will be, and if it's worthy of having a committee, or not? Go ahead, Supervisor.
Bill Hughes had his hand up. I was just
Go
going to
ahead,
call
Bill.
him.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I appreciate the work that Elena did, good work, because it really spoke to exactly what I was saying at the last meeting. Really, the citizens review isn't we could say it doesn't have teeth. It's just where people can file, can send their complaint if they so choose. But it really gives the citizen an umbrella, right? The sheriff can choose to do what they want at the sheriff's department. And we're not talking about this sheriff, because this will go on in long past any administration that we're talking about. So when we're talking about policies, we're not talking about today. We're talking about tomorrow and past tomorrow, right? And so if a citizen so chooses, currently right now, the only outlet they have is to file with a law enforcement agency. There is no other outlet to file, right? And so sometimes it was voiced that comfortable with doing that under previous administrations. Now, under this administration, they may be very comfortable, but this administration will not last, like I said before, in perpetuity. So to have an outlet, whether it is used all the time or used some of the time, to have an outlet where a citizen can file a complaint, they can send it to the committee, and they can also CC it to the sheriff's department. If that gives them comfort, we could say it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't cost us anything either. And it is not time consuming because the committee doesn't require the sheriffs to participate in any meetings. So I think us to have this in place is very important, at least to the people at large. It may not be so important to others, but I think it is very important to the people at large, the citizens in the community.
And I agree completely that there's no harm in having it, right? By having this committee that we've already had and letting the public know, hey, here's another option, another way for you to make a complaint. It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't hurt or harm anything. But for me, again, if I was going to make a complaint on the sheriff, I don't necessarily want to go to his office and put the complaint into his employees, right? And not that I would ever have a complaint to make on our current sheriff. He's wonderful. But again, this isn't about who's in place. It's about putting scaffolding in place to hold the process. So if, God forbid, we had a sheriff at one point that wasn't on the up and up, I wouldn't feel comfortable walking into the sheriff's office to make a complaint to his staff on the sheriff. But if there was this other avenue where I knew that other people would know my concerns, and then again, the sheriff's department would handle the investigation, nothing would change there, I would feel more comfortable. So what does it cost us? And so I agree that there's no harm in having it. Do they have teeth to be involved in the investigation or get involved in the process that happens in the sheriff's office? No, but it's really just, and again, maybe there is a data collection in the future where it's like, wow, this committee has seen this type of behavior. Well, then maybe public safety would say, hey, sheriff, what are you doing to address this potential concern? Do we need to budget for more training? Do we need to, so I see no harm, no foul. Dave had his hand raised, and then Supervisor Cousins.
Yeah, I just want to second that. I think it's really important, and not just symbolically, but as the supervisor just said, a lot of people would not feel comfortable going and filing a complaint with the office. And so this, if it's merely for that, I think it's valuable. And as Bill said, you know, it seems to be a volunteer board, so it's not going to really have costs associated with it. And I don't think it should imply, as he said, any distrust of any current administration. I think we're just putting institutions in place that the citizens have asked for.
Okay, Claire?
Hi, I just wanted to share, you know, I think if we do think about this simply as symbolic, the nation is in a place where transparency is the hot button word, and we say it often in this meeting in particular. But if we want to address the narrative, because I hear it stated often that Columbia County doesn't have these issues, you know, we have a trusted sheriff in office, we have a beloved undersheriff in office that I know can name the things that the community is concerned about, and people trust specifically Jackie, because I consider Jackie as family outside of the work. I know that she is somebody who is beyond trustworthy and loyal, and having her in leadership is already a level towards comfortability for us. And I think that to further the conversation, to allow the community to have this small layer of, you know, autonomy over how the process is handled is only a greater step for the county and the sheriff's department toward hot button word transparency. If there's nothing that's going wrong and you guys are following all the policies and procedures as we all have faith that you're doing, you know, give citizens an opportunity to, this is something that is decades long of an uncomfortability, something that that folks have always named as a huge issue for them, that they don't feel safe, they don't feel like it'll be handled to the fullest extent that it should be handled if the complaint goes to the department you're complaining about. I think this is an easy win, honestly, for the larger narrative of mending community and police relationships, because that's, in my opinion, the goal of everybody that's sitting here. It can't be, you know, this side versus that side. It can't be we're doing everything correctly and, you know, the citizens' complaints aren't valid. Nobody said those words, but that's what's insinuated by not taking the small steps towards this grander solution. Again, you are, Sheriff, a much more trusted entity, in my opinion, and with Under Sheriff Salvatore working with you, you have a huge leg up in the community, because she is the, you know, epitome of loyalty and trust in our community. And I think that this is something that should happen, as well as some of the language that was suggested on the previous topic. I think these are not, they're not big asks. They're not difficult asks. I think we should really strongly coming up with a collective solution to some of the community's concerns.
Ryan?
Thank you. One of the concerns would be, one, when would a citizens review committee review any complaints relative to the sheriff's office? For instance, if a deputy sheriff makes an arrest and the subject of that arrest, the defendant, then files a complaint with the community, the civilian complaint committee, when would they review that? Because with the repeal of 50A, the civil services law, that all complaints, and whether they, depending on the status and what they are now discoverable to defense counsel. And additionally, what would be the standard of proof in which a civilian review committee would actually implement with respect to that? And additionally, because if they're reviewing complaints that include an active open criminal investigation, one, with respect to a particular defendant, or two, if it's in reference to an actual criminal action of a potential deputy sheriff. Those things are very important as to when and whom will be reviewing them, and when and if it will have any effect on any pending cases criminally, or also potentially any investigations into any wrongdoing of any police officer.
So go ahead, Bill.
Great questions. So in thinking about structuring this was very much like thinking about structuring the ethics committee, right? The members that we have on the ethics committee is really bound by the secrecy of the committee on confidentiality. So I should say not secrecy, it's the wrong word. Confidentiality of what's coming through. But the fact that the citizens review would simply be reviewing cases and referring them to the sheriff's office. They have no jurisdiction to make a comment. They can't go public about it. It really is to provide protection for citizens when they're filing a complaint. All the concerns that you just brought up are really valid concerns, and they should stay within the committee and also the sheriff's department, just as they do currently right now with the ethics committee. Same premise.
So I have a
think that's
question. Well, you used the term review. So would this committee be, in other words, I think we're going to have a meeting just on this. This is, I think, is really, and I think we're going to need the DA's input and the public defender's input and everybody else's. So I think this is going to be a much lengthier discussion. But I think you used the word review, Bill, and I don't know if this committee is going to be handed a complaint in an envelope, and they're going to open this envelope and review it and then pass it on to the sheriff's office, or are they going to receive this envelope with a complaint and pass it on to the sheriff's department? So,
Okay.
I mean, these are all things that we have to discuss and have to work through, even though we say it's a pass-through. Now we're getting into, much more than just a pass-through. And I don't have a specific opinion on this at this point, but I do think that we need to set the next agenda to discuss this.
I agree. I think we could do a whole meeting on the process, on how they're received, when they're received, who receives them. Is there a chair of the committee that receives them on behalf of the committee? What's the next step?
Way more involved than just having a ethics committee, as Bill referred to it, with confidentiality than just that. I mean, we're going to have to put together a platform for how this is going to work. We need the sheriff's input on that.
But that is a good example to address Ryan's concerns, because I, as an elected official, could have done something illegal.
Correct.
And Ryan's office could be investigating it, and somebody could put it into our ethics committee, right? So it is a good example of to address Ryan's concerns that yes, this is possible to have both existing at the same time. Elena, you had raised your hand. Was that on accident? Oh, meeting at noon.
That was an accident, but I must step out. Just let me know when you need me to continue. I apologize.
Thank you.
I think we'll like you at the next meeting, Elena, because we'll probably have this as our agenda. And then Claire, you had your hand raised next.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to jump in quick if you guys can hear me. I think that a weighted system might be useful in this, and I've heard it used in other places where what's the reason that you're coming to this panel of people before the sheriff or instead of the sheriff? Have you tried to go to the sheriff? Is it something that you like? What's your level of uncomfortability with going to the sheriff? Might alleviate some of this, just like every time is a pass through. I think that could be overwhelming, but I think if there's some type of validity to why you felt more comfortable coming to this panel and having that be a part of the process, that's something that like a survey or some type of online process that lead you to the next step of actually getting to the panel is where my mind goes when I think of a citizens review board. Like, not always the first buffer, but the just in case buffer.
So I would suggest that we wrap this meeting up, and we for the agenda for the next meeting, we should have a final document here, and with some of these changes we already discussed for the body camera. I think the main topic will be the body camera. There's a few loose ends, but not much. And we should be able to wrap up this whole committee within the next, I'm guessing, 2 more meetings. would be my suggestion. So I think we should just make this the main topic and bring all our questions to that meeting and concerns and all of that. That's my thoughts on this.
Agreed. And if I could, Rob, if the next agenda is just citizen review panel, and we'll actually save that final draft of the body camera policy for the following, because that gives you and me and Elena and the
Right.
sheriff and undersheriff a
Right.
chance to meet outside, because if they are going to put something in there on that, we would like that all at once instead of
Fine.
7 different drafts. So, okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your time. And we are going to meet again. Let's see when that next meeting date is. It would be November 1st from 10 to 12. We had talked about a 2-hour meeting, so we had to have less. So if everyone can keep 10 to 12 blocked out, if we don't need the whole, but that way, if it goes an hour and a half and we get through citizen review, even better. So November 1st, 10 to 12, if everyone can keep that in their calendar. And anything else from anybody that didn't have a chance to speak? Is there any members of the public? We used to, oh, Bill, go ahead.
What I was going to say, because a lot of times we're talking about these policies, we have to remember that 3 or 4 other agencies signed on here, and I'm not sure if any of those agencies are
They've
present.
been invited.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, I did include the other police agencies, so they're just busy and they're again shorthanded, so I think it's gonna be difficult for them to get on sometimes. But I've been keeping them in the loop. They've got the links to everything.
Great.
And
Thank you.
Sheriff, the hope of Rob and I as co-chairs is to get wrapped up in the next 2 or 3 meetings, like he said, because we do understand how much of your time is valuable and being so understaffed. So we appreciate you taking the time to be with us each time, you and the undersheriff, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap it up in another couple meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tony.
Oswaldo, are we all set?